When I'm surrounded by cell phones, internet, life, getting mental clarity is so hard. When I'm in the outdoors, things just become so much more clear.
Welcome to the Rivers and Tides podcast, where we have guests on to hear their stories of resilience and healing through their outdoor pursuits. Rob, thanks for coming on the podcast
Absolutely.
today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
How was the trip up from Beaufort?
Yeah, it's good. It's good till
Not too bad.
you get up here in the
Until you hit
traffic.
Charleston and you're stuck
traffic's
in
a little bit
traffic?
more.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it was good. That's a pretty drive for the between there.
It is. How long have you been in Beaufort now?
9 years.
How long have you been a captain down there? A
5
guide?
years.
Okay.
5 years. Yeah.
And Green Heron Adventures is the name of your
Yeah.
company, really, right? Because you're not just a skiff guide; you have tour boats, right?
My fishing company is Green Heron Adventures, and I've since launched additional stuff. I have Beaufort Dolphin Adventures as well, is a tour company down there in Beaufort, more eco tours and stuff like that. But I have other captains that typically run that boat. I needed something to expand with, but my fishing company is Green Heron Adventures. Yes.
And then you're having a new boat built for the other part of it, right? For the
We pick
tours.
up. It's going to be it's a multi-stage build, but we pick up the whole on Monday. So yeah.
Nice. Well, that's
Pretty
good.
excited
You're
about that.
expanding down there and
Trying. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Well,
So.
before we go any further with that stuff, why don't we start out? If we could just go back, get some history. Let's just start. Like, where are you from? Where were you born?
Yeah. So I was born in Florida. We moved to Alabama when I was like 11. So typically Claim, Alabama is where I grew up because those are all my formative years, like things I actually remember growing up. That was all Alabama.
No accent though.
No, that's the benefit of being born in Florida. So yeah, raised in Alabama, my preteen teen years, and went to college up in Greenville, South Carolina, and then I will get into it, but lived in a number of places after that, and yeah.
You have siblings?
I'm the oldest of 6. So,
6?
Yeah, there's a bunch of us.
Wow.
Yeah,
It must have been some household growing up.
Yeah, it stayed busy.
Did you keep them all in line? Was it your job to keep everybody in line as the eldest?
That is typically how that one falls out. Yeah. They nowadays, fortunately, they were all small back then. Now they're all bigger than me. So
do you see them all pretty regularly? Are they all spread out?
We're spread all over the place, from Alaska to Florida to everywhere in between, North Carolina. Yeah, we're pretty spread out.
Wow.
We didn't have our family, because we moved there. We don't have like deep roots in Alabama. My parents are still there, but there's not like deep roots that kept us there. Most of us spread out pretty far. So yeah.
So what was high school like for you? Did you were you a good student? A studious student? No.
I've never been. I've never considered myself to be book smart. I've later in life found that I guess I can, if you apply yourself to anything, you can do well. My interest in high school were more hunting, fishing, outdoor stuff. I think I wanted to be a mechanic back then. Yeah, I bet I could do a lot better at school if I'd applied myself more.
Your outlets in high school were a lot healthier than mine. Mine were making, like I said, when the last podcast when we were introducing ourselves, is that my high school was hanging out with friends and setting up times to have the next party and
Yeah, my upbringing was a little bit different. I was a preacher's kid, so much more. A little maybe sheltered. My outlets were definitely hunting and fishing growing up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you get introduced to fly fishing back that far?
No. We used to think that people in Southeast Alabama, people that fly fish are pansies.
Really?
Yeah, dude. It's a little like. Now this is from the perspective of like redneck Rob in Southeast Alabama as a high school kid. Like I remember one of our buddies came from up north somewhere and he had a fly rod, and we're out there like fishing catfish and bass and bluegill, and he brought his fly rod, and we're like, what is this?
What is this
like,
guy doing?
We just thought it was so pathetic. Little did I know. But I was big into bass fishing. That was my thing, was bass fishing growing up, and hunting. Yeah.
When did you decide that you were going to go to college? Did you always know you were going to want to go to college?
That was kind of always, my parents had gone, like, it was always this thing like, hey, I was always encouraged from a young age to go to college. I think that seed was planted early. I never really realized that there was an option to not go to college. I guess I did, but I thought that if I didn't go to college, like small town Alabama, that was like the next step kind of to get out of the small town Alabama was college. So it was just always
back then. Did you see yourself wanting to get out of there and go see other places and kind of?
No, I grew like it's very small town mindset that like I grew up with a very small town Alabama mindset. And then so I'll just kind of jump ahead, like ended up going to college, so Bob Jones University in Greenville, South Carolina, really religious school. So again, not a super broad like perspective on the like worldview kind of perspective. It was the Marine Corps.
Small school.
Yeah, small school, not very broad. Like it was ultimately like everything kind of changed when I joined the Marine Corps, which kind of, again, skipping ahead a little bit. When I joined the Marine Corps, that's when like a much more broader worldview, traveling, I was exposed to so many more things. It definitely changed molded a lot of who I am now, what I value now. Yeah.
Greenville, I haven't been there yet, but I've heard
it's a beautiful town.
Place.
Yeah, what kills me is that I thought that fly fishing was for pansies back then, and
even in college.
Oh yeah, in college, like I didn't not much change. Like it's kind of
that's a big fly fishing spot.
No, I know. Now, I was like killing myself. Like I was always like, this sucks. Because even I know a lot of people like you hit college and you kind of give up the outdoor pursuits. Maybe it was because of the college I went to. It was like pretty strict, a lot of rules and stuff. So my outlet still in college was hunting and fishing, and I stuck with that. But yeah, I'd try to find bass lakes or somewhere I could bass fish.
When you were surrounded by like
no, I know
beautiful trout streams.
Yeah,
and
now I know, and I'm like, man, I could have got a fly rod and disappeared into the hills, which I did hunting wise. I went and chased deer and up there when I was in college. But little did I know that I was missing out on some great. I discovered fly fishing in my mid-20s.
Okay.
So that was later on, yeah, in the Marine Corps.
Have you been back to fish any of those waters in Greenville?
No.
I'd like to go up there and.
No, I haven't. I've been back goofing off. Well, I guess technically I have because I've been up to like Brevard and stuff.
Yeah.
A little bit, not like I'd like to.
When in college, or at what point did you decide I'm gonna go to OCS and I want to be a Marine Corps officer?
That was I don't think my path to that was like, I think a lot of my peers, this was always like their plan. Like they like schemed this thing. They want to be a Marine Corps officer. 9/11 had a big impact on my life. Like looking back, small town Alabama, watching that happen when I was 12 or 13, something like that. That had a big impact on my life. Like I was a very impressionable age.
When you say it had an impact on you, what do you mean by that?
Like most Americans at the time, like angry.
So did you start from that point? Did you think like a seed was
Yeah,
set?
I should say, so I grew up in Enterprise, Alabama is a military town. Okay. Fort Rucker, Alabama, they've recently changed the name, but it's a helicopter training base for the Army. So we were surrounded by military. That happened, and that seed was definitely planted. And I remember wanting to join the Army, and my dad's like, go to college. Let's try college first. So the seed had been planted, and I remember wanting to join the Army or do something, and I was encouraged to go to college. The funny thing, I actually wanted, looking back, I'm grateful for that. My dad I wanted to guide. I wanted to work outdoors, and my dad again, like, go to college, do the thing.
Get your degree and then reevaluate.
Yeah. So I really went to college, ultimately ended up going to college with a business management major, and I was pursuing associates in auto and diesel mechanics. I kind of gave up on the military idea and thought that I was going to go back to small town Alabama or something and maybe have an auto shop or something like that. That's kind of was my path on my way into college.
At that point,
it's funny how little, you don't know where these things are going to take you. But 9/11 definitely planted the seed, and then 2008 happened. my sophomore, junior year, 2008 happened. And
Are you talking about the
whole market crash and everything.
financial
So
crisis?
so my buddies were getting out of college and not getting jobs. Nobody was, there was nothing out there. And I remember after my sophomore year, going into my during my junior year, thinking maybe I can go to like boot camp between junior year and my senior year.
So you were thinking about like enlisting?
Yeah.
In between.
Yeah. So I went to the Army, went to Army recruiter, talked to him, was trying like, hey, I'd like to go to boot camp this summer. This was winter of 2000, I guess like December 2008, January 2009 timeframe. And I was like, I want to go to boot camp this summer. In the Army, nothing against the Army, but the recruiters there treated me kind of like a number. And I was like, didn't really get a good vibe. And I walk out of the recruiter's office, and there's the Marine Corps office next door. And I walk into there, and it's like, hey, here's what I'm thinking of. And the dude's like, oh, you're finishing up your junior year of college. You need to talk to this guy. And we're talking January of 2009. And he's like, you need to talk to this guy. And I call an OSO.
Which is officer selection officer.
Yeah, the officer selection. Yeah, watch the acronyms. So I call an officer selection officer. I had no clue what I was getting myself into. I had zero clue. I talked to my officer selection officer 2 or 3 times, and I was in OCS. And
really,
that summer I went to 10 weeks of OCS.
So
it was like a 3-week turnaround from me talking to an OSO to being in OCS.
So
3 months.
How does that work? I mean, do they ask you? Because it's interesting. I know the enlisted side of how that worked for me. You pick your MOS, and I actually ended up doing a different MOS, but military occupational specialty. But as an officer, I actually, and I mentioned this in the last podcast, I actually tried.
Yeah, I listened. I was listening to you talk about that. Yeah.
And I wanted to go back as a pilot and everything. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but did you know what you were going to do as a Marine Corps officer at that point? When does that?
So the Marine Corps work? Because of my size, how small I am, my eyesight and whatnot, the Marine Corps wanted me to go to try out to be a pilot. Also needs the Marine Corps, like they needed pilots. But the Marine Corps, other than if you're wanting to be a pilot or a JAG, you don't get to choose your MOS. You are open contract.
Okay.
And they basically give you your MOS after, the basic school, after you graduate the basic school, which is a 6 months, that's your first school after OCS.
So you're in college, and then you.
Yeah, 3 months.
Shotgun wedding with the Marine Corps.
I had no clue what I was getting myself into. People were like, they're talking about like leadership and whatnot. Dude, it was.
And I've heard OCS, unlike, I think in Marine Corps boot camp, when you show up there, they don't expect much from you. Like they build you up, like physical fitness wise.
Like very, very familiar. Yeah.
But from what I understand, they expect you to show up at OCS running like a 300 physical fitness test. Like they want
not a 300, but pretty.
They want you pretty high.
You don't get to squeak. Like if you're squeaking by, you're gone. Yeah. They expect for a lot. I don't. Looking back, how that all went down, how quickly that happened. I'm grateful I made it. Like I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I fortunately had always been very active.
Was there a point in the beginning where you were like, what the hell did I get myself
there's a letter
into?
I wrote my dad that I think he gave. I'm pretty sure I have it, but I haven't read it again. Where I was like, I don't know what I got myself into. I don't at the beginning I was, when reality started to strike early on in OCS, I was like, what did I get myself into? It was, coming from like the perspective it was wild. It was a wild ride.
I remember the first night, when you get to Paris Island for boot camp, you have receiving. And you're getting yelled at and it's crazy and it's terrible. But then you get, after the 2 days of receiving, you go to your drill instructors, you go to your platoon, and it's like when they picked us up, that first couple of days, I was like, what? I don't know what I got. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know how. I need to get out of here. I remember thinking to myself, how can I get out of here? And, I think pushing through that and getting through boot camp
is ultimately what makes it's part of the building blocks that ultimately get you to where you are.
So yeah, it's interesting.
It was wild because again, a lot of my peers, they had been preparing for this, like their dads were officers. They'd been preparing for this their whole life. I honestly didn't really I did not grasp what an officer was. I mean, it was honestly a shotgun wedding with the Marine Corps was definitely what
So what did you think of, like, do they do a lot of leadership work in OCS, or does that really start when you get to TBS?
So
which is TBS, what does TBS stand for?
So the basic school, yeah.
Right.
So OCS is more or less what I would describe. So being very familiar with ultimately I ended up spending 3 years at Parris Island. Being very familiar with kind of both sides of the house. OCS is very much like a job interview. Like you said, like you either have it or you're gone. Whereas Parris Island, they're not trying to get rid of you. You're a number.
Yeah.
You're there.
Although they call quite a few people out.
Oh yeah. They break you down, build you up. OCS, you're definitely they don't expect you to be running from the get-go, but the crawl walk phase is much smaller, and it's more or less a job interview, like a 10-week job interview or a 6-week, whatever program you go through. It's a job interview. Do you have what it takes to be a Marine Corps officer, as opposed to boot camp? Hey, you signed the dotted line and you're there. And the funny thing about OCS is when you're done with OCS, you can decide, hey, it's not for me, and I'm out. And actually 4 weeks into OCS, now granted, I'm speaking from 2009. I don't know what things are like now.
Right.
When you were there 4 weeks in, you could decide you wanted to quit. And I remember at the 4-week mark, a number of people were like, I'm out. But at boot camp, you can't do that at boot camp.
Yeah, there's no quitting.
You can try, but you aren't going anywhere. Yeah.
At that 4 week, by that 4-week mark, had you decided I'm gonna get through this?
I didn't think there was a phase early on. There was definitely a phase like, what did I get myself into? But I wanted it. I wanted it.
A little windy. We were actually supposed to go out on the water this morning.
Well, we did. We were sitting on the island and this is a little too windy.
We did go out. We were on a nice same spot we did the last podcast from, but instead, because of the wind, we're sitting here in my backyard.
Nice backyard. I like it. I like it.
So in the basic school, that's where you start learning like infantry skills, leadership.
It's basically like a very basic, like infantry, basic squad, platoon type infantry skills type school. Yeah.
I've heard that you're kind of graded by your peers while you're there. Is that right?
Yeah, there is an element of that. I'd forgotten about that. That's years. This has been a while ago now. There is an element of that there. Yeah.
Did you take to the leadership part of being a Marine Corps officer? I mean, did you like the leadership piece of it?
Yes. I don't know. I mean, that's the role. That's what you are.
Yeah.
Like in that role. So if you didn't, you weren't going to
be successful.
I had a lot to learn back then. I'll say that.
What?
I wasn't top of my class.
Who at that age?
Right. I wasn't top of my class. Like, I had a lot to learn. And I definitely, who I am now is definitely a result of a lot of trial by fire and mistakes. And, I mean, what an amazing thing to do in your 20s, to get all of that condensed into your 20s and get so many life experiences right then, being evaluated by your peers, being expected to do the things that you had to do at that point. Like a lot of learning happened back then.
And what was
it still is. I haven't arrived.
I think you're learning. I think you're always learning. In fact, exactly. I think that's an important mindset to have, is that I always feel like I have something to learn I feel like I have something to learn to anybody I speak
100%.
to. I feel like if you don't learn something new every day, you're missing out. I really think that, I'm learning a lot about saltwater fly fishing right now. Which,
Me too.
Me too. I mentioned in the last podcast, that's you'll always have a special place in my heart, because you got me on my first time out saltwater fly fishing, first tailing redfish, and
it's an addictive. I've warned people, it's an addictive experience.
It absolutely is. It's almost religious, I would say, to a degree. But at what point, you say that all of that time in the Marines and what you learned from there really molded and made you who you are today. What would you say, what major parts of that would you say had the biggest impact on you as far as making you who you are today, your success? How does it make you a successful captain even?
A boat captain. Yeah.
Yeah, not a Marine captain anymore. What did you say earlier?
Captain Rob has a lot more fun than Captain Alexander did.
Yeah, I like that.
Life's a little more fun now. The Marine Corps, the level of responsibility that you get as a young, really anyone in the military, no matter what you're doing, but especially in my path and my role as a young officer in the Marine Corps, the roles, the responsibility, the level of professionalism, attention to detail, the expectations, everything that's dumped on you at that young, the trial by fire, the responsibilities that are dumped on you at a young age. Ultimately, I mean, you either rise to the occasion or you break.
Sink or swim.
Yeah, it's sink or swim. And I'm grateful to have made it through I guess I made it, so I guess I succeeded.
Yeah, you did.
So I'm grateful for all those experiences. Ultimately, when you take that and then you you come into the civilian world, your peers in the civilian world most of them haven't experienced that level of responsibility, just all the stuff that comes on going to combat zones or places where your life is threatened, going like the experiences that you get in the Marine Corps. If you don't come out of that a stronger person with a skill set that is going to help you in anything you do in the future, I'd be surprised.
I think it makes you adaptable.
Oh yeah,
extremely adaptable.
That's very true. Yeah, you can really, you have a skill set that you can plug into a wide range of things in the outside world.
Yeah,
to include guiding, to include something like what I'm doing now.
Guiding, yeah. And I think it makes you adaptable, and it gives you that. I've always approached work of like, there's not a problem I can't solve somehow.
Oh, it gives you. I hope I'm humble, but it also gives me a confidence to know if I survived all that, we can do some stuff.
We're gonna take a quick break, and then as soon as we're done, we'll get back into it.
Let's dive.
So after TBS, what did you do? What did you end up doing as an officer in the Marines?
So I ended up getting assigned military police. Went to Fort Leonard Wood for school, and got assigned to a deployable unit. Never ended up working on the road or anything with the MPs. Ended up doing more like security work type stuff. At the time, there was a lot of like host station police training missions. So we did a lot of training for that. Didn't end up going on one of those missions. Ended up going on a security mission, but yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about being an agent in my time with the Diplomatic Security Service was that I got to kind of circle back in a way and work a lot with Marines.
Yeah, alongside I never worked MSG duty, but as we've already talked about, I did end up getting deployed to Yemen in 2013 and at the embassy there, and worked with the State Department, with the security guys and stuff closely with them while we were there in Sana'a. So yeah.
What was Yemen like?
It was on the brink of disaster then. There was a lot of things were happening. It was very, it was a really good experience looking back. We never engaged anybody, but there was a lot of stuff. There were gunfights in the streets, on occasion. Everybody at the embassy got evacuated while we were there. It was definitely a hairy, other than us and like the trigger pullers. It was a interesting experience. I learned a lot.
How long were you there for?
5 months. Yeah.
And how many Marines did you have under you? Were you the
senior?
I was
the XO. No, I was the XO. Okay. I was the XO of the company, which is why that's why I said like I got to work closely with the State Department, because it was the company commander was more overlooking that stuff, and I was the liaison, turned into largely the liaison, working beside the State Department.
Okay.
Or like in coordinating what we were doing and what they were doing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And we had talked, you've traveled to a bunch of places, and Is there any place you didn't like going, or did you
Well,
feel
so
like you
yeah,
learned?
with the Marine Corps, the only place I made it to overseas was, of course, we were in Bahrain, then we were in Yemen, and then ended up, I'd gotten married, that fell apart, got divorced. Buddy introduced, was like, "Hey, you should come on a trip," and I needed that, and I turned him down on that trip. He went to Peru, and and I saw the pictures of stuff, and I was like, "Dude, I needed it." I was in a bad place in my life, mentally. With that divorce, I would never had a good heartbreak yet, and this was my first one.
This is why
I
we're
was
still in the Marines.
This was while I was still in the Marines, and I was like, dude, next time wherever you're going next, I'm coming. We ended up going to Australia and New Zealand. Later on, did a trip with him to Tanzania. So I ended up from then like starting to travel, yeah, but not Marine Corps wise, just for fun,
just to
experience life and see, like, once you start to taste that. I got a little bit of a taste of that scene, Bahrain, scene, Yemen. Once you get a taste of that, it's like, what is the rest? Like, what else is out there? It's a huge world, and very. I saw I talked about small town Alabama kind of mindset. Once you start traveling and seeing what's out there, for me, that was had a big impact on my life. Just kind of opening a worldviews, perspectives.
Makes you realize it's a big world.
Oh yeah, the world's huge,
and seeing other cultures and other places.
Yes, it's so
really awesome.
So there was a period of time before I got focused on building a business for myself, and this where I was doing a fair amount of travel internationally. Yeah.
That's cool. So, when did you decide? At what point did you decide that you were going to not make the Marine Corps career and it was time to get out?
Dude, I thought about it, as we all do. Every time you come up on a on a re-up, I decided so I did 2 tours. First tour at Camp Lejeune, second tour Paris Island, working with recruit training, drill instructors, all that stuff. The first time I'd kind of dabbled with the idea of getting out and guiding. I thought maybe this would be good. Ended up staying in. You have literal blood, sweat, and tears invested in where you're at, what you're doing.
I mean, were you augmented at the time? Did they do that?
Augmented?
Like, to be sometimes I thought where you had to be like, if you wanted to make it a career, you had to.
Oh, career des.
Oh, yeah.
Career designation. So I got career designation.
Okay.
That's during my first tour, because some of my buddies didn't and ended up getting out at that point.
Because that's a milestone.
That's a milestone. So like things were going in the right direction. I actually had a great experience at Paris Island. Things were going very well there. Had some amazing. I mean, not on my own.
Great experience at Paris Island.
No, it's very different.
Paris Island
no, very different than I got to get enjoyment out of watching
watching recruits.
Yeah, sitting behind the glass, being like, "Hey, drill instructor," or when the recruit would do something like, "Hey, sorry, get over here, take care of this." Yeah, no, I had a really good experience. Not one that I'd want to go back to. Like, you're living there, you're living at work. It was one of the harder things I've ever done, which is sad to say, because watching the drill instructors do what they've done, dude, that's another level beyond what I was doing there. What I was doing there was petty compared to what they were doing. I mean, that's insane. Marine Corps boot camp's
big
insane.
Responsibility.
What drill instructors are doing is insane. But working right beside them, being a company commander, platoon commander, I was having a great experience. Like things were going well, but ultimately, I'll be honest, the outdoors. That thing that I told my dad early on, I wanted to guide, I want to work outdoors, just kept nagging at me. And ultimately, I found that my heart was becoming less and less in the Marine Corps and what I was doing. And that thing in me that wanted to work outdoors, wanted to pursue a guiding career, it was stronger and stronger. And
were you fly fishing by that point?
So I'd gotten introduced, so that was part of it too. I got introduced to fly fishing actually by one of the drill instructors there. Was like, "Sir, you should try this thing out." And so I'd started dabbling with like flood tides and the fish. And I had a boat. I had a flats boat at the time.
You had a flats boat even before you started fly fishing?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a bunch of, when I was at Camp Lejeune, I bought a flats boat and I was getting out there
spin
casting, sight fishing. Like, I was like going that direction.
So you kind of already had that. You were
so we
going
kind of skipped that. The logical thing then was somebody introduced me to fly fishing. Once you get the bug of fly fishing, as you know, things start to spin quickly. Then you start fly fishing. Then you read Trout Bum. by John Urich, and things start to like snowball, and I started to find that desire to work in the outdoors, and to like that thing started growing more. So yeah, I had a flats boat, was getting into all that. Ultimately, my first sergeant in one of our short breaks between cycles there at Parris Island, he's like, "Hey, I'm doing this outward bound canoe trip. Do you want to, like, there's an opening, you should jump on it." And I was like, I don't have anything going on, I should try that out. So I went on a outward bound veterans core like canoe trip into the 10,000 Islands down in Florida. And this was when I was seriously considering getting out, but I did not know how to take the step, how to get into the outdoor industry, how to anything. I was trying to find my next step, or I hadn't decided I was getting out yet. Anyways, I did the canoe trip, and our guide he was a Marine, had gotten out, gone to Knowles, used his GI Bill to do a semester course with Knowles for wilderness guiding, and had gotten into the outdoor industry. And I was like, over the course of that canoe trip, when you get in that, and this is, the outdoors has amazing, like when I'm surrounded by cell phones, internet, life, everything, getting mental clarity is so hard for me. When I'm in the outdoors, things just become so much more clear. And I realized in that canoe trip, I need to get out. I need to do this Knowles thing. I need to work in the outdoors. Whatever it takes, I'm going to do it. And so I ended up dropping papers shortly after that and deciding I was going to get out.
I always wanted to do a Knowles course. I always thought it would be a cool
honestly, one of the best things that one of the best courses I've ever done in my life.
I forgot about Knowles. Maybe that might be something to look in for my kids to do.
Oh, yeah, especially if you have the GI Bill option. I don't know what that's true.
I'm on the old GI Bill. I'm an old man. Come on.
It is the best. So ultimately, if we want to jump into my transition.
Well, I guess one question before, like, you seemed like you had pretty much made your mind up. That's what you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Was there any apprehension? Were you nervous?
Oh, I was terrified.
Yeah.
To walk away from a good paycheck, a career that was going in the right direction, everything, to walk away from that was terrifying. To pursue this idea of working in the outdoors, I mean, dude, I thought I was giving up everything. Yeah. I thought everything of like tangible value, like money, or I'd never make like a good paycheck again. Safety, insurance, like all that. Yeah. Like I thought at that point, I thought I was walking away from everything like that. I thought I was like, go.
I think I think people do struggle with that, because if you're unhappy with what you're doing, or not that you are unhappy, but if you would rather be doing something else.
Yes, my heart wasn't. I say my heart wasn't in it.
But it's that can be a tough pull between even more if that safety net of like, you have insurance, you've got income.
And at the time, I was a single dude.
Yeah.
If I'd had a family or anything, like people who have more the more responsibilities you have on top of that, like that makes the decision so much harder. This was an impossible decision for me as a single dude. Like that was terrifying to walk away from the military. Yeah.
So you made the leap.
I pulled chocks and jumped. I did.
Without a parachute.
Walked away from. Well, I saved up a little bit of money and jumped. And my plan, my stepping stone was I was going to go travel for a bit and do Knowles. Was about 4 months after I got out, I was slated to do Knowles.
Did you feel like after you made that decision and you got out, did you ever at any point feel like, what did I do? Like, was that the right decision? Did you miss what you were doing, or feel like you wanted to go back at any point?
I definitely miss what I had earned. Like, you've earned something, you've gotten to that position, and then you're walking away from that.
Like they say in the commercial, you're in the title, right?
The level, I don't know, the level, what I experienced when I got out of the Marine Corps, for me personally, that I did not realize how much stress I was under at Parris Island, or just and when it felt like a load off my back in that sense. Like, I did not realize like how stressed I was but I was very fortunate in that when I got out, instead of jumping right into a job or something, I didn't have a plan. I'd saved up some money. I went and traveled in Europe for a bit. I kind of turned. I was living out of my truck. Not something I recommend, but I was a single dude, and I went from kind of real, more or less what I described earlier, like a sheltered upbringing to a very strict kind of religious college to the Marine Corps, and I never had a place in my life to truly find myself. And so I kind of pulled chocks and started traveling. I traveled, like I said, Europe. I came back, moved everything, packed the truck, moved out west. Did some elk hunting out there. Ended up getting an elk with my bow right before I went to Knowles. Did the 3 months in the wilderness with Knowles. I could not have had a better. So think I'm in the outdoors this whole time.
Yeah.
I could not have had a better transition into the civilian world, because I had, instead of the world pounding me like that, I was off the grid. I didn't have a cell phone. I was in these environments which is very much like a tribe, like Knowles. It's very much like you're a little tribe moving through the wilderness for weeks on end. We're in the Canyonlands for a month.
Which, and I think something that a lot of people struggle with when they get out of the military, that you hear pretty consistently, is they miss that camaraderie.
Yes.
And you kind of stepped into it.
I was fortunate.
You left the camaraderie of the Marine Corps, but you stepped right into another type of camaraderie, which we've talked about. Like,
yes,
in the outdoors, you do have this other tribe, which is a great way to put it.
Yes. Well, I think Sebastian Junger, the book Tribe.
Yeah.
That's where that term comes from. Like, you have your tribe in the military, and fortunately for me, and I feel for individuals, like, responsibility doesn't allow most people to be like, I'm just going to pull chalks and go travel and hang out in the outdoors until I find myself. And I am very grateful to have been able to do that. But for so many people, that's not something that you can just be like, I'm going to be irresponsible and go do this. I was very grateful to find another tribe very quickly in the outdoors.
It's not. I think you would the way you did it would be sort of, for lack of a better way of thinking to say this, to the extreme.
Oh, the extreme, for sure.
As far as just kind of disappearing.
Yeah.
But I think I'd be interested to see what you think about this. But I think that for those that get out and they don't have something lined up, that's the one you see, like, in my experience,
and
I've seen people struggle.
Yes,
because they don't have. They feel there's all of a sudden there's this void.
Yes,
and they don't have anything to fill it. They don't have that camaraderie anymore. They don't have that responsibility anymore. They don't have necessarily, those safety nets that we talked about.
And that's what I was afraid of getting out. I was afraid of, like, falling into that void when I was told about Knowles, and so now I had something to step into. I'd kind of planned, like, my brother was in Europe with the Army, so I'd kind of, like, planned a couple steps along the way to kind of fill that gap. But fortunately, so I pulled chalks and jumped, but it wasn't like I didn't go to, I had something, although it was kind of a nomadic something. It was a something.
But I think short of that, for me and for people I've talked to, other people I've talked to, something like, obviously a lot of people can't do what you did, but they can pick up fly fishing.
There's
get into hunting, or, get into these outdoor pursuits.
Hiking, get outdoors. Get away from this world that is it creates so much, in my mind, in my head, there's so much static in this world, and it's so hard to get clarity. It's so hard to find a community or a tribe in a lot of these synthetic kind of environments with people that are often very fake,
or consumed with whatever,
consumed with things that are ambiguous and don't matter. But the outdoors is just, it tends to be a much better environment for finding people that are real, that have a connection with reality. That, like, for me, the outdoors has always been my, like, place where I find connection with whatever spiritual thing there is. Like, that, for me, the outdoors is that. And when I find people that are spinning or not finding a connection, I often feel like the outdoors would be a help.
I think, and that's, ultimately the goal of doing these interviews and this podcast. That's what we're really trying to get across.
Without the outdoors, without my the connections and the outdoor environment, man, I'd be in a tough place in my life. I would be. I know, because I know from, well, that was one of the things when I was getting a divorce. I went and bought a boat. I'm like, I've got to
what
do
a better idea.
Yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, I've like, I saw myself spiraling. I saw myself going that direction. And I was like, I need to be able to disconnect from this. I need to be able to spend time in the water. I need to be able to get my head back right.
Well, and I think so there's different ways to fill voids in your life.
Yes.
A lot of them are
unhealthy. No, I tried. There was a month or two where I tried alcohol. And I found, like I said, I found myself in a place that was scary, and I found myself spiraling in a direction. I'm fortunate that I did not damage my career in the Marine Corps. In that time, I found, I was fortunate. Yeah, and I bought a boat. I started getting out. Yeah, go.
Well, and I think that's the message we want to get out.
Yes.
It's like, there are a lot of tempting and negative ways to fill the void there, and there's also a lot of really positive ways that I don't think a lot of people getting out of the military, or anyone struggling, whether someone's out there struggling with depression or PTSD or whatever it may be, that there are a lot of healthy ways to fill those voids. And for what we're talking about, to me, some of the healthiest ways is to get in the outdoors, do stuff outside.
Do something that is disconnected from your phone, that's outdoors. I cannot think of a better, and I think studies and stuff prove that, like, go along with that too. Like, the outdoors is one of the best things you can do for mental health. It is, and I'm glad, I'm glad to be kind of saturated in it now, because I wouldn't be, not that I still have my demons and struggles and whatnot, but it would be hard if I didn't have the outdoors, for sure. That has been my tribe, or my connection, or my thing past the military, has been a pursuit of the outdoors, almost to the extreme.
Yeah, well, that's all right. I think that a lot of people who serve in the military, or who have these these challenges, that's kind of how they operate in a lot of ways. We
tend to be quirky.
And lean towards the extremes in certain ways.
There's some things that are off. Yeah.
I heard on another interview that you did, like you just said, you feel for Marines or anyone, veterans in general, who are struggling. And what advice, we just did talk a little bit about it, but is there any other advice as far as, someone might be watching this who is struggling, and that you would say, here's a step, maybe join a group like Project Healing Waters, or something like that?
I think those are good things. The first thing that comes to my mind, and I will preface this by saying everybody is different.
Correct, absolutely.
There's going to be people whose mind works like mine. There's going to be people where my advice doesn't mean jack squat. My advice, I think a lot of veterans, when they get out of the military, expect the military, whatever it is, like the veteran status, to carry them into the on.
Yeah.
And my advice is, take all that chapter of your life, all those life experiences, everything you did. And what I tried to do when I got out of the military, this is just me observing what other people are doing and being like, let me try not to do that, was that I came at this, and the way I still run my business, the way I conduct myself, I actually try not to lead with the whole veteran thing. I've tried to come at civilian life without leveraging all that life experience, all those things, leveraging it, but not expecting it to take me somewhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the way I think of it is, and this is easier said than done, is that, when you get out of the military, you need to leave. You need to take what you learned and leave the military
That's
behind.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Leverage it.
Yeah.
Use all that experience. But you've got, and I feel for veterans who, it's like they're still living in that military, that past life, and it's almost like a ball and chain, sadly.
It's holding
them back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. And it's, I get it. I mean, it's like a huge part of your life and all that. But I have found, personally, better success or whatever by not leading with the whole military thing, sure, I put it on my resume and whatnot, or, fortunately not really had to do a resume. I did.
Your office is a boat.
Yeah. Sure, I'm not hiding the fact that I'm a veteran, or I'm not whatever, but I'm also not expecting that to be the thing. I'm hoping that my own merit and my own hard work and my, like, what I bring to the table and how people perceive me as me. And then later on I can be like, oh, and I spent time in the Marine Corps, or like, and I can follow with that, not lead with that.
You know, I'd like to wrap up with something that I heard you also say on a previous interview, and I really like the way you put it. So I'm going to let you, if you wouldn't mind repeating it, is that you
got to remember what this is.
You treated it like it's a chapter of a book.
True. That's what I referenced a minute ago. Life is many chapters. We have, like all our life and then for us, many of us, that military chapter is a very pronounced, very dramatic life experience. But as you're, like I just said, as you're transitioning out of the military, hopefully you can like move into a new chapter, live these new experiences, have this new, and this makes you who you are. That old chapter, that military thing definitely forms, it's who I am.
Yeah, you draw on it.
Life. Yeah, you draw on it and you build on it, and you continue to like write more chapters in your life instead of staying in that chapter.
And I think that's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And because I think that a lot of people, they don't know what to do when they get out, and they think that the military or that time is everything. And it's, I think us having retrospect.
Yeah, this is all like, this isn't me getting out of the military day one. This is me looking
but
back.
I think that's what we have to offer.
Is
retrospect.
Yes.
And wisdom. Maybe.
Sure. Sure.
I use that term very loosely. Is that it is just a chapter.
It is. It's an amazing chapter.
It's a great chapter. It's a chapter that it definitely forms a bedrock of the foundation that the person I am today, you are today, but it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Rob. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No. I guess ultimately all that led me to getting into guiding, ended up coming back to Buford, and I get to, my office now is a boat, and I'm very grateful for that. My mental sanity is much better, because it's amazing. I feel very blessed for all those things, my path, the chapters, have ultimately allowed me to do what I'm doing today.
So. Well, I can tell, like, for someone who was out, you must be a great guide, because for me to be out there for the first time, having never gone saltwater fly fishing, and to catch 3 or 4, I think, tailing redfish.
Really? We did that?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know it was that many.
Yeah. I've got the pictures. We'll look at them again.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that many. I've been very blessed. Yeah. Very blessed. And grateful for wherever this is. I'm grateful that people still want to come back and fish with me. That's kind of the thing that is pretty amazing.
Well, you're a great person, great dude.
Thank you.
Great guide. So
you as well.
Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right.